Hey guys, welcome to Raw Custom and Happy New Year to you. So yes, 2023 was a very busy year for me and I didn't get out a lot of videos. I'm hoping to change that in 2024. Last year I was just really busy, guys. Now the biggest thing that happened this year is me and my wife bought some property. So the majority of my free time has been spent out on the property, putting in a house, working the land, and also getting a building set up where I'll be putting the Raw Customs shop set up, camera area, work area, everything out there. It's a much larger building than I have right now, so I'm really excited to get out there, get started on it. So if you guys would like to see some of the process of me setting up the building, setting up the shop, and getting the design for my workshop and for the Raw Customs filming and other stuff, let me know and I'll try to make some videos as I go and share that with you as well. But to get 2024 started, I figured I'd put out a video of me and my son building a half pipe. This was a pretty fun project. Recently my son Daniel started skateboarding, and it's something I used to do when I was younger and really enjoyed it. So I got out on the board with him and that muscle memory came back. I was actually able to get out there, skate and enjoy it and have some fun. And he really wanted me to go skateboarding with him, kept bugging me until I bought a skateboard. We went out to skate park. Really had a blast, was able to get on the half pipes a little bit, so we decided to build a half pipe of our own so we could go right out in the backyard and skate and practice, so we'd be more prepared when we went back to the skate park so we could enjoy it more. Now this is more of an overview, guys, not really a DIY video, but hopefully you guys can pick up some tips or at least enjoy watching the video. So let's get to it. Here's how we did it. I started with 4x8 3/4 inch plywood for the sides, then measured in 15 inches from the side and the width of a 2x4 from the bottom. Then I measured up 6 feet from that point and screwed a 2x4 to the floor to make a pivot point. I held a pencil on the edge of a 2x4 starting at the point that I'd marked and drug it along the plywood to mark my radius. To cut the radius, I used a circular saw. I set the blade depth to around 1 inch and then cut out the curve. Making the blade depth shallow allows you to cut those curves. After making the cuts with the circular saw in the corner, there's just a little bit of wood still holding the pieces together, so I used the jigsaw to make the final cuts. Starting my radius from 15 inches from the edge will allow me to make 2 sides from each sheet. Once the first side is cut out, it's spun around and lined up with the edges on the other piece of the sheet and clamped together with some C-clamps. To cut the remaining side pieces, I used a router with a guide bushing on my bit and used the first section that I cut as a guide to cut the radius in the remaining side sections. Once I had all the side sections cut out, I lined them up side by side and made sure everything was even and then clamped them all together. To mark the area for the side runners, I used a 2x4 and marked the width of it starting at the bottom edge. We continued marking like this all the way to the top, giving an 8-inch spacing between all the marks. To help make the assembly a little easier, we started screws at all the areas that we had marked for the 2x4s. We pre-cut all the 2x4s to 7 foot 10 inches. So at this part of the build, all we had to do is line up our 2x4s with the marks on our side walls and fasten everything together. We used 2 2.5 inch screws on each end to hold the 2x4s in place. So the plan is to make a 16 foot wide, 4 foot tall half pipe. So we made 4 quarter pipes, 8 foot wide each. At this point we had to do a little groundwork with the tractor to prep the ground for the ramp. To make setting and leveling the ramp easier, I decided to set it on some 2x6 runners. To make the runners, I sandwiched two 2x6s and nailed them together. I made 3 runners, one for each side and one for the center. We used concrete blocks to set and level all our runners. We used 2x4s on the ends just to hold the runners in place. Now it's time to start putting the ramp together. We set the first 2 quarters in place on the runners. Once we had them lined up in place, we used some C-clamps to hold the 2 sections together, and then used screws in the sidewalls to hold the 2 sections together. We made the floor 16 by 8. We used 16-foot 2x4s for the cross runners. The 2x4s were spaced out 8 inches on center, and the 2x4s were held together using 2-inch nails. Once the floor was finished, the 2 quarters for the second side were slid into place. Then the quarters, the floor, and the runners all screwed together. For decking, we used plywood 4 by 8 sheets. We screwed the plywood to the floor first, and then screwed down the pieces to each side. Since I'm the heaviest, I had the job of standing on the panel to bow it down while Daniel screwed everything in place. Before we laid the top section in, I made a notch at the top front corner, so I'd be able to set in some 2-inch pipe for coping. After that, we laid in the top sheet and bolted it into place. I held it in place while Daniel marked each side so we'd know where it needed to be cut off. Then we removed the sheet, marked a straight edge, and cut off the extra. We set the sheet back in place, and while it was bowed, Daniel started a couple of screws on each side for reference where the 2x4s were. Then we used the piece we cut off as a straight edge and laid it on the 2 screws on each end and started the screws in the center. With the screws started, I pushed the board back in place while Daniel drove all the screws down. So we did end up putting 2 layers of 1/2-inch plywood down on the ramp and built a 4-inch deck on each end and covered it with 3/4-inch ply. To seal the wood, we sprayed on 2 coats of primer. For the top skin, we screwed down a layer of masonite. It is nice and smooth to skate on, but it is not a long-lasting material. Eventually, I'd like to put down something like gator board or something equivalent to that. However, the gator board and skate light sheets are very expensive, about $100 to $150 a sheet, and that's just not in the budget right now. So if any of y'all know anything that's cheaper and equivalent, let me know down in the comments. Another reason I was using masonite is because we're planning on pulling the ramp back apart and moving it. The ramp is designed to come apart in 5 pieces to allow me to move it. And the plan is when I move it to put down a better skin. For the coping, I used 2-inch conduit and drilled holes all the way through them and mounted them in place with 2-inch lag screws. Now as far as the cost to build the ramp, with all the materials and fasteners, it came in right around $2,000. Now I really love building stuff, and it's been really fun to do this project with my son. He's been really excited for us to have our own ramp. Unfortunately, during the time we were building the ramp, I actually tore my calf muscle, so Daniel gets first shot at the new ramp and I have to wait a few weeks before I can try it out.